Hello everybody and welcome to part 16 of what if Izuku Midoriya had the Omnitrix. Well, you should already know by now what this series is. But quick warning, this episode does not pick off right after part 15, but you have Project Windy Hindy, or as it's called on YouTube, with two Omni Heroes United that comes first in the timeline. And if you watch this one without watching that one, you'll be a bit confused. Yeah, this episode kind of skewers things from how they were going, so hope you enjoy. If you do, don't forget to hit a like, subscribe, and most importantly, enjoy the video. A portal opened up in the middle of a city with Izuku falling out of it a speed lizard. Even though this was the second time he had gone through a portal, he hadn't gotten used to the weird sensation yet, so he came out stumbling out of it, falling to the ground. Where'd the villains go? He asked, getting up as fast as he could to confront the enemies he had been chasing. But when he looked up, his surroundings were completely different than what he expected. Around him were gigantic buildings and futuristic-looking places. Vehicles flew around in the air while people walked on the ground. The buildings around Midoriya looked huge, and there were even areas that extended downwards. The people walking the streets looked oddly normal, none with mutant quirks or anything. There were a couple of people that looked different, but Izuku could tell they were aliens. He had seen their species before. "Hey, looking good, Deku! Keep on rockin'!" A 15-year-old kid shouted, passing by Izuku on his hoverboard. He zoomed past and continued on his way, two of his friends coming after. Whoa, what was that? Izuku wondered, seeing the boys fly past him. He marveled at his surroundings for a few moments. He walked around aimlessly, astonished at how different everything was. He started coming up with a few theories about where he was. It could be another planet or alternate dimension. Before he could prove any of his hypotheses, he heard a loud crash nearby. "It's the villains from before," he assumed as he rushed over. He arrived at what looked like a bank just as the alarm started going off. 3 people were just exiting the place through a makeshift hole. "You guys coming or what?" a hulking man with what looked like a toenail on his head said. He was carrying 2 bags in his hands and trying to shake the dust from the hole he had made out of him.
"Sweet, sweet crystals, come to mama,"
a woman said, coming out of the building while contemplating a small crystal. She had pale skin and strange orange hair that seemed to consist of a few tentacle-like pieces. "Yeah, they do look very nice," the hulking man said, looking enthralled at the crystals. "You two need to focus up," a man said, coming out of the smoke the last. He had wrinkled pale skin and red eyes. Along with many other elements of his face, his hair seemed to have melted off somehow. "We need to get out of here before he shows up." "You aren't really who I was looking for, but I can't just let you get away with that, now can I?" Izuku commented to himself, making himself known to the trio. Without a comeback, without so much as a small warning, the wrinkly man opened up his mouth, regurgitating an acid stream which went flying towards Izuku. In his Kinesalan form, Izuku easily evaded the attack, moving out of the way. "Ah!" he commented, shivers going through his body as he looked at the disgusting side effect of the attack. It melted through the sidewalk, making a small hole towards the lower areas of town. Midoriya shifted his attention back towards the villains. As he did, he was smacked in the head with a bunch of the lady's hair tentacles. He was sent tumbling around while he reeled from the attack. Before he had a chance to recuperate, he was smashed into a wall by the hulking man.
"Now we need to go, before he does anything tricky,"
the woman said, grabbing onto as many bags as she could with her hair. "Speed lizard isn't gonna cut it," Midoriya thought, struggling to his feet. He hit the Omnitrix, trying to transform into Icewing, but all that happened was he turned back into his human form. "He turned himself into a kid?" the one with the acid breath questioned. "Whatever. This one will be easy to clobber," the hulking man commented, dropping the bags to the ground and smashing both his fists together to attack. Before the very eyes of the group of circus freaks, many more versions of the Midoriya began appearing, surrounding the group. "The more the merrier," the hulking man shouted, rushing at one of the Izukus. He smashed through him, tearing Izuku apart as if he were mere mist. All the other Izuku's eyes began glowing red. Then they suddenly started morphing, turning into hideous, frightening creatures.
What's this? Another transformation?
The woman asked, smashing one of them apart as they approached. "He has a million more of them. It's hard to keep track," the man with the acid breath shouted back. Izuku just stared at the battlefield in confusion, wondering why the group of villains was just attacking the air. Moments later, a pterodactyl-like alien with 7 eyes landed before Izuku. Its skin was a purple-black color, contrasted by its orange wings and colored uniform. "Are you okay, kid?" it asked, looking over Midoriya to see if there were any injuries. "Ah, what a pain," it said once he got a look at the boy. "I'll deal with you later, but for now, get to safety." "But I can help," Midoriya complained, looking over the creature to spot an Omnitrix symbol. "I have an Omnitrix too." "If you have an Omnitrix, then that means one of 2 things. Either you timed out, or it isn't currently working," the creature said. "Either way, you won't be much use in combat, so get out of the way." Midoriya nodded to the alien and ran to the sidelines where he'd be able to see how the battle progressed. As he ran to the sidelines, the villains got overwhelmed by the monstrous versions of Izuku that were attacking them. The Izukus reached them, but the moment they made contact, they just vanished. "They're just illusions," the man with the acid breath shouted. He looked around, spotting the pterodactyl alien. "That's the real one! Get him!" Heeding his orders, the hulking man charged at the alien. When he got close, a flash of light emanated from the alien just as the man smashed down. His fists were caught by 2 tentacles. The pterodactyl alien had been replaced by another alien, one that had a flaming head and 4 tentacles coming out of him. 2 were sustaining him while the other 2 had caught the fists. "You think you can hold me at bay?" the hulking man asked, slowly pressing down against his opponent. "I don't have to," the alien answered. His expression became more fierce as more heat started being produced by his body. The arms that the hulking man was smashing against started flaring up, and he was forced back, screaming in pain. The alien approached Thumbskull, wanting to knock him out of the fight, but before he could get close, a stream of acid came at him. Another flash of light enveloped him, so when the acid hit him, it hit nothing but sand. "Ugh, this is pretty disgusting," the alien commented, looking at the melted sand. He set the box that generated his body down and overproduced himself, extending himself to trap the acid villain inside the sand. He started going off, wanting to trap the villain high up, but as he went up, the box was forcibly moved by the lady with the movable hair. She threw it back, yoinking the sand along with it. Before the box could hit anything, another flash enveloped it, and it turned to muck, hitting the building. Her attack made her friend fall too, but she caught him before he hit the ground. The sludge then put itself together, forming the body of a Lenopen. "Alright, this is taking long enough," the Lenopen said, grabbing the 3 villains and hiding them within his body until they passed out. Once they were defeated, the Lenopen threw them out. The crowd that had formed around the incident then started cheering, excited that the hero had won. "That was amazing! How did you transform without even having to hit the Omnitrix?" Izuku asked, looking at the Lenopen as he approached. "It's something you got the hang of after a couple years of experience," the Lenopen said, turning back into his human form. "Wait, you're... Izuku stammered, looking at a man that looked pretty similar to his father. Maybe it was more accurate to say that the man in front of him looked like him. "Deku! Deku! Give me an autograph!" a kid from the crowd requested. The future Midoriya obliged, signing the boy's toy. After seeing that act, more members of the crowd started becoming unrestless, with a camera crew barging through. "Deku! Deku! Please, a comment! You've been all over the world recently, so what do you have to say to our viewers at home?" The reporter requested to know. I'm just doing my job, the future Deku responded. So stay safe and stay out of trouble. He turned to his young self and said, You and I should talk, but first. He turned around and walked back towards the 3 unconscious villains, stretching his hand to touch the 3 villains. While he walked, unbeknownst to him, the sound of a whistle covered the environment, inaudible to the human ear. What are you doing? The young version asked. Before the future Izuku could execute his plan or answer his younger self's question, a crab dozer jumped into the street, crashing into the ground. He started rampaging, trying to attack the future Deku, causing the nearby crowd to quickly disperse. After a quick moment, only the 2 Izukus were left there. Not one of these again, future Deku complained. Why do they keep showing up everywhere? Once the words were uttered, he transformed into a yellow-armored, robotic-like creature with hammerjacks incorporated into his arms. Future Izuku put his hands to the ground, causing massive trembling in the surroundings. The floor beneath the creature ended up giving in, sending it falling down into the streets below. What was that? Young Midoriya asked, looking down the hole that had been created. To him, it looked like it all just went down forever. As Midoriya looked down, a whistle noise went throughout the battlefield again. He saw a faint light in the distance flash for only a second. The creature then started scaling up the building, approaching the surface at rapid speeds. The bastard isn't done yet, the future Izuku said, trying to come up with a plan. His young counterpart wanted to help, so seeing the creature come at him, young Midoriya hit the Omnitrix, but nothing happened. He tried again, but the same dud noise resounded out of the watch. The creature leapt at young Midoriya, trying to encase him in its mouth, but before he could reach, a green light flashed next to Izuku, a red hand pulling him out of the way. The future Izuku grabbed onto the beast, holding it back with 2 arms while he used the other 2 to make sure the mouth stayed shut. The creature kept struggling until it heard the signal, causing it to start morphing again. It turned into a demon-like dog mixed with a bull, with a mouth on its tail. It quickly overpowered the adult Midoriya, sending him flying into the air. Wanting to avoid causing collateral damage, he switched to Lepidopteran, shooting a bunch of goop at the enemy predator, trying to keep it subdued while it landed. Another whistle noise extended throughout the environment, ordering the predator to change forms once again. It changed back into Bug Lizard, burning the goop with its acid sweat. Once he landed, future Izuku switched into his Splixen form, sending multiple copies to try and overwhelm the enemy. At the same time, another went to talk to his younger counterpart who was messing around with the watch trying to transform. What are you still doing here, Midoriya? Go! Get to safety! Midoriya's future counterpart ordered, pointing in a safe direction he could run in. But I want to help. People are going to get hurt if that thing just keeps rampaging, young Midoriya responded. His future counterpart, knowing himself, knew what response would come, yet still, he had tried to get him to leave. You said you wanted to help, so help, future Izuku ordered his younger counterpart. Turn into something and help out. The younger Midoriya again tried to transform but couldn't. The older version saw this attempt, so said, Let me look at that. In the battlefield, the Bug Lizard quickly turned into a Penuncian, multiplying to take care of all the Splixen. Thankfully, future Izuku was able to keep them at bay using the environment in the city to his advantage. Huh. You seem to have gotten your Omnitrix entangled with a signal that isn't even in this dimension. That should fix it, the future Midoriya said to his younger self after messing with the device slightly. The enemy was starting to overwhelm him, so future Izuku turned his attention to him. He transformed into a cerebral crustacean, sending a neurokinetic blast at the aliens, which briefly knocked them down. Again, the mysterious sound encased the environment, so the Penuncians banded together, transforming into Vicetopus and approaching the 2 Midoriyas. In order to stall a bit, the future Midoriya showed a constant kinetic blast at the enemy, although it barely slowed him down. Let's try a combo move. I'll turn into the Segmenta Sapien and keep it restrained, while you drain out the oxygen supply with the Gyoke Leon Aereo, the future version suggested. I don't have the Giochoretto Ierio, the young Midoriya responded. While they talked, the Vice-Octopus got close enough and wound up for a smash. Before the attack could hit, the future Midoriya switched into a Kineceleran and moved his younger version out of the way. He then returned into battle, hitting the enemy twice before running away again. Right. I got access to the Segmenta Sapien first, so you turn into the Segmenta Sapien and I'll turn into the Gyokelon Aereo. The future Izuku recalibrated the plan. I don't have that one either, young Midoriya said apologetically while opening up the Omnitrix and looking through his playlist. Neat. I have Inferno, Speed Lizard, Four Arms, Rolling Rock, Spider Monkey, Humongosaur, Crystal Fist, Mr. Nature, Brainy, Icewing, Reverb, Laser Raid, Acidic, and this Gravity guy. While the younger version was listing out the available transformations he had, the older version kept trying to attack his enemy in his Kineceleran form. The opponent was big, so it couldn't react well to its speed. But along the way, it transformed into a giant snail-like alien and started scattering a lot of mucus around. The older version got in close to attack, but he was stopped dead in its tracks once he hit the mucus. Its prey trapped, the snail slowly started slithering towards Midoriya, wanting to eat him alive. But before he could reach, Midoriya switched into his ectoneurite form, phasing into the ground and popping up next to his younger self. As his future version appeared beside him, a chill ran down young Midoriya's spine, scaring him for a moment. Just when in the timeline are you from? The future version asked, confused. Well, it doesn't matter right now. Turn into your Pyronite form. I'll turn it into a meta... you don't know that one. Wait until my signal and shoot fire. We'll blow him sky high. The future version suggested. Midoriya nodded and activated the Omnitrix, scrolling through his options. That's going to take too long, the future Izuku said, seeing that his opponent had turned into a Soul Eater and was approaching. Here, let me speed it along. He lifted the faceplate slightly, making the second screen of the Omnitrix light up. He touched 3 points of the screen simultaneously and moved those spots in a specific order. A moment later, his younger self had turned into Inferno. The future version changed into his Meta-Sapien form and took a few steps forward. He was now a huge living chemical laboratory, so he started mixing nitrogen atoms to create azoridazide azide, releasing it into the environment after making it. The beast got the order to transform again, but seeing 2 different enemies in front of it, it didn't know what to turn into. It chose the Crab Dozer form, thinking it the most resilient. Now! Shoot your fire at it now! The future version shouted, switching to his Segmenta Sapien form. The younger version obliged, shooting a fireball at the Crab Dozer. Ordinarily, this attack would do nothing to the Pyronite's natural predator, but as the fireball approached the beast, it ignited the gas. A massive explosion was set off, sending the creature flying into the air. The blast was so big, it threatened to destroy the buildings around it. Luckily, future Izuku had already foreseen this and had protected the buildings. I can never really use that move without destroying everything around me, the future Midoriya said, turning back into his human form slightly hurt. It was pretty good for an improvised move, to be honest. Did we beat that thing? The young Midoriya asked. I wouldn't count on it, the future counterpart answered, a depressed look on his face that slightly reminded Midoriya of a weakened All Might. I've beaten that thing about 27 times over the last 2 months, and every time it just gets stronger and smarter. Anyway, onto what I was doing. He slowly got up and turned his attention to the trio of villains he had defeated, wanting to cure them. But when he looked in their direction, they were gone. A bright light then flashed behind him as his younger self turned back into his human form. What was that gas alien? What can he do? How do you even call him? The young Midoriya asked enthusiastically, curious about the transformation he didn't have. This version of himself seemed to have a lot of those, unlike the last version of himself he met. I don't name them anymore. That is Uraraka's thing. Well, it was before she... The future version said, his voice saddening as he went along. Those weren't memories he liked revisiting. When are you from anyway? I don't recall having the Pyronite form with that version of the Omnitrix. Pretty sure I only figured out the code when I had the Ultimatrix. What do you mean, when am I from? What happened to Uraraka here? The young version asked. It's not something I like talking about. It wasn't a pleasant experience, the future Deku said, a depressed look on his face. The battle over, many civilians started gathering, wanting to see their hero. Let's talk somewhere else, the future Deku suggested, not feeling up to dealing with a crowd. Somewhere more private. The young version agreed with the idea, so the future counterpart turned to his Kinesillarum form and sprinted away. Are you satisfied with the results, Kyber? A galvanic mechamorph asked, observing from the shadows. Quite so. The extra Omnitrix user was a surprise, but having 2 Omnitrixes on my wall will be better a trophy than 1, the hunter said, stroking the head of his pet. Next time we confront him will be the end of the hero Deku, the galvanic mechamorph said, slightly excited to take his revenge. And now we have the perfect bait to lure him out, the hunter said, looking at the 3 unconscious villains from before. After a few seconds of running, the 2 Midoriyas arrived at his future headquarters, where the future version dropped the younger version off in the monitoring room. I'll be back in a flash, the future Deku said, going down into the building for a moment. Wow. The young Midoriya couldn't help but let out as he looked around the room. The room was filled with monitors that were tracking global events as they happened. He found multiple medals and trophies, although they seemed to be hidden in the background behind all the work that had yet to be done. So many questions were swirling in his head as he looked around. While he looked at the most recent articles, Midoriya couldn't help but notice the frown that was on his future self's face in most of those articles. Right, the paperwork is done. Man, I wish school had taught us how much of a pain that is, the future Izuku complained, entering the room again in his human form. Now, let's get you home. Already? But I have so many questions, the young version said. Like, where are we? We're in our headquarters in what used to be Yaku City. The place was decimated after the fight with Shigaraki and the Paranormal Liberation Front. So you chose to make your agency here then? Why? The younger version asked. Well, I operated out of my tower for a bit, but it didn't feel right. It wasn't my place to work there, even if Muriel had requested that I do that. Helping the area rebuild seemed like a good idea, not to mention it would keep me centered. It was around then everything started going wrong, the older Izuku said, looking at his younger self with a regretful look. The kid had such a bright look on his face. The worst days in his life were still ahead of him. The older version couldn't help but feel sorry for that. Let me ask you something. Have the cracks started showing yet? What do you mean? The younger version asked, slightly confused. He was somewhat intrigued by what he was being told, but didn't understand much. The idea of working out of my tower in the future did excite him, but the way his older self was talking seemed depressing, not exciting. Muriel, your upperclassman, have the cracks started showing on him yet? The future Izuku asked. The younger version shook his head, letting his future self know that he had no idea what he was talking about. Good. So you're from before February then. Still in your first year. What was the last major event before this whole thing? Like, what's the last major thing that happened at school? The future Izuku asked. I fought Albedo with Bakugo, Midoriya answered, thinking back on what happened a mere week ago. Which time? Did he attack you with Vilgax yet? The future Izuku asked. No. The first time, I guess? But I thought Vilgax was dead or something. The last time I saw him, his ship blew up, the young Midoriya said. So did I, his future self responded. Okay, so you're from around October then. Just a bit after the whole Hasaikai thing, right? His younger self nodded, so he started walking, encouraging his younger self to follow. Where are we going? The young Midoriya asked. To the Chrono Porter. It's a couple of stories below. The future version answered, walking towards the elevator. He hit the button and they waited for the elevator for a moment. I have to ask. You obviously became a hero, a good one at that, but you become number one? Midoriya asked his future self while they waited for the elevator. He wanted to know if he'd reach his goal. Kid, I didn't just become number one. I'm the hero of heroes, the greatest hero to have ever lived, the future Izuku said, a depressed tone in his voice. But his younger self seemed extremely excited at that prospect. He was also slightly confused, wondering why his future self had given him such good news in such a sad tone. The elevator arrived and both Midoriyas got into it. So you're number one, right? Who's number two? Kacchan? Mirio? Maybe Todoroki? The young Midoriya asked. I doubt you know him yet. His name is Rex, Izuku answered. What about the number 3 hero? It's a guy named Zack. Doubt you know him yet either, his future self responded. Really? I always assumed Kacchan would end up in the top 3. Me too, kid. Me too, his future self said in a sad tone of voice, making his younger self think the worst. What happened to Kacchan? The young Midoriya demanded to know, a stern expression on his face. He died during the Dark Days, couple months after the whole Paranormal Liberation Front fight, the future Izuku answered. It's after his death that you decide to take on the name Deku 10 as your hero name. What about Todoroki, Uraraka, Ashido, Ida? The young Midoriya asked, desperately wanting to know if his friends and classmates were all right. The elevator arrived at its destination and both Izukus exited it, while the future Izuku answered the question. Todoroki was killed by his brother, Uraraka died a couple years later during a related incident, Ida is still operating as a hero, and Ashido along with most of Class 1A decide to retire after everything that happened. Most of them even got their quirks removed. Ida is the only one who didn't retire that is still active. The two Midoriyas arrived at the room containing the Chrono Porter. The future Midoriya immediately went to the controls, while the past version looked at his hands, powerless. First he visited an alternate universe where one of his best friends died, and now he was in a future where most of the people he held dear were dead too. Tears streamed down his eyes. He was unable to control his sadness, so he just let it all flood out while his future self messed around with the controls to the machine. What would you have done differently? Midoriya asked, wiping the tears off his face. I think you already know enough about your own future. Telling you more could seriously compromise the flow of time. The future version responded. Messing around with the machine's controls had reminded him of the Time War, and the numerous warnings Paradox had given him. He had been babbling about the past when he shouldn't have. What would you have done differently? Young Midoriya asked, raising his voice. His future self could feel the pain. He should have kept his mouth shut, but knowing himself, he wanted to answer. He now felt he owed him an answer. A lot of things. It's not just a simple thing I can answer. It's a complex domino of events. But if I were pressed to answer, I'd have to point out different things. First, I would have told my friends about the Omnitrix. About everything. Maybe them knowing would have saved some lives down the line. The second thing is, I would have requested they put me in the forest team. Or at least the backup team instead of the main group. If I had had the Tokustar DNA at the time, I think I would have been able to stop Gigantomachia. The future Izuku answered. I hope that helps. I hope so too, young Midoriya said, trying to calm himself down. Okay then. I'll send you back to where you belong. Just give me a moment. the future Izuku said as he prepared to activate the device. He asked his younger self to step onto the platform. Once he had stepped in, the future Izuku activated the device. It started going off, energy accumulating inside the core. But before it could fire Midoriya back to his own time, the machine began to leak, breaking apart quite quickly. Izuku, still in the tube, put his hands up trying to safeguard his head as everything fell around him. He closed his eyes while flinching, opening them once all the noise passed. What happened? The young man asked, slightly frightened. The chronoporter must have gotten damaged during the time war, the future Izuku answered. He walked towards his younger self, turning into a Tetraman on his way. He then lifted the container, freeing Midoriya. He then turned back into his human form and opened a communications channel, calling for someone to fix the chronoporter. I called tech support, although I think Bloxx and Dreep are going to take a while to get this right, the future Izuku said after he finished the call. If what you want to do is send me back, why not just use Chrono Wind? The younger version asked. The future version put his hand to his chin and started thinking it through. Once he came to a conclusion, he spoke up. An interesting idea, but I think the Chrono Sapiens time travel abilities are a bit too crude to land you in the exact time you need to be. It could create some consequences to the timeline, the future Izuku mumbled. Waiting for the machine to be fixed or for someone like Paradox to show up is likely the best course of action. I almost forgot about him, the younger Izuku commented. Had been an eventful day, very focused around Paradox. He'd met him before but only really gotten to know the man over the last day or so. Yet, even with the impact the time traveler had left, the last hour was so eventful he had almost completely forgotten about him. As the young Midoriya thought this idea through and the future Izuku argued with tech support, trying to get them to come sooner, an alarm started going off throughout the building, catching the attention of both Izukus. What is that? The young Izuku asked, looking around to see where the sound originated from, but he wasn't able to pinpoint it. The sound was coming from all around them. It's a crime alert. I'm surprised it took this long to go off again, the future version answered. He switched into his kinesillaran form, grabbed his younger self and zoomed over to the monitoring room, where he took a look at what was happening. Whoa, that is very disconcerting, the past Izuku said, getting his bearings after being moved so quickly. What's going on? The three villains I fought before are at it again, trying to rob another bank, the future Izuku informed. Why can't crime stop long enough for me to take a nap? Izuku whispered from under his breath. What are we waiting for then? His younger self asked. Let's go stop them. Hold on a sec, the future version said before his younger self could even transform. The depressed look now replaced with a serious one, reminding his younger self even more of a deflated All Might. The Predator could still be with them, or turn up later. We need a plan. Any suggestions? The young Midoriya asked. As a matter of fact, I do, the future Izuku answered. Moments later, Izuku, a speed lizard, made his way to the location of the incident, finding the three villains. Using his speed, he rushed into Thumbskull, turning into Humongous at the last moment, sending him crashing into the wall. In response to the attack, Acid Breath shot a stream of acid at Izuku. Seeing this coming, he switched into Ice Wing, letting the acid pass through him.
Hey! Careful!
Frightwig shouted, almost hit by the last attack. Acid Breath shrugged as an apology, allowing Izuku to freeze him over. Frightwig smashed in Midoriya's direction, expecting him to go intangible so she could free her partner. But Midoriya instead switched into forearms, catching the swinging hair. He pulled on her hair, throwing her against the wall, knocking her out. All according to plan, he said to himself, looking at his environment. He spotted a pipe and tore it out of the wall. For a moment, an unknown gas came out of it, but it stopped a moment later. Acid Breath took a moment, but he broke free from the ice. The moment he did, he was hit in the head with the pipe, knocking him out. Izuku then switched into Mr. Nature, throwing a couple seeds at the ground that moments later grew to capture the 3 villains. Seconds after the situation was resolved, a weird monster with multiple appendages appeared, wearing the same symbol the monsters from before did. "Now it's my turn to take you on," Izuku said, preparing for a fight. The moment he said this, the onagers gave out, turning him back into his human form, revealing the young Izuku. A few moments ago, in the city's rooftops, the future Izuku stood there, observing the battlefield in his Volpimancer form after having called for an evacuation of the area. He was paying attention if anything happened to his younger self or went off course. As he observed the fight, he heard a strange whistling noise. It took him a moment, but he pinpointed its origin. The moment he knew where it was coming from, he switched into his Lepidopteran form and flew over. The moment he arrived at its origins, he found 2 beings there. A Zarophian he did not recognize, and a Galvanic Mechamorph he did. Malware? Future Izuku shouted in surprise, not expecting to see the being he had once helped cure there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please, please, please hit that like button and subscribe because a lot of work went to this video. I did all these aliens, and there are more coming in the next part, and it's been driving me crazy making all of this stuff. So please, like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'm hurt. I'm genuinely hurt if you don't like this video. Yeah, comment down below what you think is gonna happen, or which one's your favorite alien that he used, that Deku 10k used in this video, or what aliens you want to see him used. I mean, the part's already written, and most of these guys are already drawn because it takes so long. So which ones do you want to see him use, or would you have liked him to use? That's what I'm asking you guys to tell me in the comments, because it was an opportunity to use a bunch of aliens that Deku hadn't unlocked yet, so why not go crazy? I really like that the original presented us a couple, Ben 10k presented us a couple future versions of the aliens and a couple new ones, so I thought I would pay that forward with a bunch of stuff. 2 new aliens, one here and one in the next part, will be showing up, so hope you're hyped for that. Until next time, everyone, have an absolutely fantastic day. The next episode should be next week, and I hope you're excited for it, because I think it finishes the story here, and I think it's pretty good. So yeah, see you then. Bye!